All right, welcome everyone. This is, of course, the February meeting for San Diego Svelte. So it is 6 o'clock here in San Diego. We have both an in-person audience, in-person group, and then, of course, we're streaming live as well. So I usually give everyone roughly about 5 minutes or so to show up. So we have people kind of streaming in. So in the meantime, I do have a slide deck that I prepared. I believe I need to open the door for someone. So give me one moment, and I'll be right back. All right, so yeah, so as I mentioned, people are going to start trickling in. For people that are joining us online, basically we can use this first few minutes. If you have any questions, comments, just do kind of an informal Q&A session. I'm more than happy to do that. Also, if there's no questions, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of do a couple informal announcements. And like I said, we'll give it another roughly 5 minutes, and then we'll kind of start the presentation. So yeah, let me start with just a couple announcements. So number one, so in terms of our physical meeting space, a big thank you to Xinjiang, who's the company that's office spaces we're using. They let us meet here at no cost. So a big thank you to them. They're both a mobile app and web app based agency. And then I'll do a quick introduction about myself. My name is Attila Buterla. I'm a full stack software developer, over 20 years developing apps, over 10 years doing single page applications. And yeah, started back in the day with AngularJS, moved on to React, I think when most of the industry kind of did that shift. And really just within the last year, started using Svelte. Welcome. Okay. You're the first one here, but we do have, we are streaming live as well.
So, excellent.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I come down from Encinitas, so I might take advantage of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna do the slides in a minute, but just kind of doing introductions. So yeah, so I've been developing for many years, and I've become a big fan of Svelte, big proponent of Svelte. I am an independent consultant, so depending upon the client, I still have a lot of React-based clients, but I enjoy Svelte. I think it's a much better tool, and that's part of the reason why I started this group, is because I want to see it spread. People, kind of share my experiences with people, and hopefully see it kind of grow as a community. So let's just give like 2 more minutes we're supposed to have roughly 6 people come today. So
My friend Eugene's in traffic.
Oh, okay.
Got another probably 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, so I can tell. Let's see. I can tell a quick story. Let me do that while we're kind of killing time. I want to tell a quick story, and yeah. So it's really funny. I was just thinking about this the other day. My first experience doing a single page app was over 10 years ago. It was with AngularJS. At the time, it certainly felt like we were pioneers because people weren't really talking about single page apps or spas or front end frameworks. We just I was a technical lead at a company. We're building a brand new site, and my previous work, we were just doing more and more stuff client side. And I had this idea: how about we just build the entire site with JavaScript, HTML? We'll use RESTful services. We did that without any concept of our framework. as we got into it, we realized, hey, there's certain challenges here. Did some research and was like, oh, there's actually these tools that are designed to help with this sort of thing. We had to choose between Backbone, Knockout, and Angular JS. Those were the options at that time. I was actually a member of the San Diego JavaScript meetup group, which was just started out. It was just a handful of members. And I remember talking to people there, and they said there were some people there that tried all of them out and said, okay, definitely go with Angular. We went ahead. This was a app that was used, eventually used in all the Costco warehouses across the US. It was this really amazing experience because it was cutting edge. We were doing cool new tech where it was a much richer end user experience. And yeah, it was just a real positive all around project. Now, fast forward a couple months later, that company we worked for, I think it was already in the works, probably a year ahead of that. But they basically said, "Hey guys, we're gonna bring a bunch of people in from overseas. Your job is to train them. No more development work for you." So kind of quickly got the hint and started looking for a new job. Updated my resume, spoke to a few recruiters, and one recruiter in particular I remember speaking with. Prior to that, I was a .NET developer, and I had over 10 years of experience with just .NET, ASP.NET, C#. And she was saying, hey, great, there's a lot of .NET jobs out there. And I said, well, you know what? I just use this new thing called Angular JS. I really think this is the future. I can't see myself going back to the old way of doing things. I also think the industry is going to totally change. She said, well, you know what? I speak to a lot of hiring managers. Nobody's asking for this. Nobody's asking for this. You're making a mistake. You should go to what's tried and proven. And you know, I don't blame her. She wasn't a technical person, but in my mind, I was like, there's no way that the industry isn't headed this direction. But she was right. There were no jobs. There was no, at that point in time, no Angular jobs. There wasn't, the hype was not there. We were ahead of the curve. We were kind of bleeding edge on the curve. And it was just the circumstances lined up. Roughly, I don't remember exactly how long, roughly a month, 2 months later, all of a sudden, it just blew up, almost seemingly overnight. And just being able to say, hey, I know Angular JS, and I had worked on a project with Angular JS, like all these job opportunities all of a sudden were available to me. And I remember like going in for an interview, and I would talk for 5 minutes about this thing I made in Angular JS, and like, that was it. I had the jobs, and I was surprised how easy it was, but I realized like none of these people had any experience with this tool, and they knew that it was a hot new thing. They couldn't really ask me any questions about it. And you know, my story, I guess, was believable enough. And I mean, it was true. So yeah, I remember I got, I did some contract work, ended up working at Intuit on TurboTax when that was Angular JS based. But it was such a great time to be, a great place to be at this forefront of this hot new thing, and it seemingly blew up overnight. Now, the other side of this is just as quickly as it blew up, it seems like the Angular team kind of shot themselves in the foot. They said, you know what, they didn't quite say it this way, but we're going to totally throw away everything you learned, forget it. We're throwing in the garbage. We're making this new thing. It's totally different. And we're also calling this Angular. And a lot of the community, they lost a lot of goodwill with the community. I mean, I remember how much I struggled to learn something that there wasn't a lot of information on. And really, that was kind of the first step in React kind of taking over. And honestly, React is still, in terms of overall usage, to this day, it took over Angular and it didn't look back. So eventually I became a React developer. That's where the industry was headed. But I don't know. I guess it wasn't, for me, it wasn't the same magic. And I feel like everyone coming out of the boot camp knows React. It's for me, it wasn't fun to use. It wasn't special. Everyone knows it. It's not going to set you apart if you know React these days. It's pretty, you know, just everyone knows it. There's nothing special about it. So when I first started using Svelte, and I heard all this good press for a couple years of, hey, this is the top rated framework, the Stack Overflow surveys, State of JS surveys. It was really rated at the top. And I figured, okay, let me go try it. And I immediately felt like this is great. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of my first experience with Angular. It's this way easier to work with. Like now that I work with Svelte, I'm like, I don't want to go back to React. I kind of have to because that's where the industry is and that's what certain clients want. But as much as possible, I work with Svelte, and who knows what the future is going to look like. Will it? Yes. Oh yeah. Just yeah. That door. Yeah. I'm right there. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. So who knows? But I believe in Svelte. It's growing. And I'm going to kind of wrap up my story here because I think we're over. Welcome. But yeah, my sincere hope is that Svelte becomes the next big thing, that a lot of people adopt it, and not that it needs to be the #1 framework, but I think it is really excellent. I think when more people use it, they're going to kind of realize, like, yes, there's a huge advantage to using this. You get a lot more done a lot quicker. And let's see, maybe in 6 months, who knows, maybe we're going to be in this kind of similar situation. So having said that, welcome everyone. I'll kind of get started. I'm streaming online as well as presenting here in person. I kind of did this already, but I'll do kind of a quick about me. My name's Attila Viturla, full stack software developer, over 20 years experience. You can see kind of my tech history. But yeah, in the last year or so, been doing a lot of Svelte in addition to React. I've worked with Intuit projects for Costco, for eBay. Actually, currently just run my own independent company called SvelteKit. All right, so onto the presentation. So I'm sure some of you are kind of curious, like, what's going on with Svelte 5? What's the latest developments with Svelte 5? So Svelte 5 was first announced, I want to say, in October of last year. They released a alpha version late November. I could be slightly off on my dates, but roughly late November. And then it's still in development. And originally they were targeting basically end of 2023. Of course, that time has come and passed. So the latest developments is, and I guess #1, before I say that, they really want to make sure they get it right. And by get it right, they want to make it the best developer experience possible. So I think they're spending a little bit more time, but I think it's important that they kind of get it right versus get it out quickly. Now, there is a podcast I listen to. I don't know if any of you have heard of Syntax FM. It's Wes Boss and Scott Zielinski. Actually, a great podcast. I recommend if you guys are into web technologies to listen to it. They're also big fans of Svelte, and it's interesting. They have a React background, but are also big fans of Svelte. They did a podcast just roughly a little over 2 weeks ago. They spoke to some of the core members of the Svelte team. And what was conveyed to them, or what they conveyed during that podcast, was that the API for Svelte 5 is basically locked down. So they're not making changes to the API itself. It's really about bug fixes and just kind of getting it solid, maybe some documentation, that kind of stuff. Another really interesting thing that they mentioned was a 6-week timetable. They thought we might see the first initial release candidate. And again, this was middle of January. So I think it's very possible we could see that come in March, because that's basically 6 weeks from the time they made that statement. That is definitely not a promise or a commitment, but a reasonable thing to potentially expect. And then we'll see. But I know when they have basically these Svelte Summit events. I think twice a year they had a Svelte Summit Fall. The day before the Svelte Summit Fall of 2023, the day before is when they pushed the alpha version of Svelte 5. So I kind of speculated, is it possible that's kind of their target date? Nothing's been stated of that fact, but I'm just kind of trying to guess, hey, if they have a release candidates in March, maybe that's a reasonable time frame. And that Svelte Summit is, I believe, April 27th, something of those lines. So very open-ended, a lot of maybes possible, but I would say as a general guideline, probably not an unreasonable kind of expectation of when we might see Svelte 5. Another piece of information, I like to do this. We've done this the last few times we met. We kind of just look at the last 2 months of growth of Svelte and NPM downloads. This is kind of a per week number. So December 10th, and I kind of just picked days that were kind of the middle-ish of the month, had basically 850,000 weekly downloads, Svelte did. And this is from NPM Trends website. January 14th, based on that number, almost went up to 950,000. So an increase of 100,000 NPM downloads. And I don't have kind of month over month, but that's kind of consistent with what we've been seeing. So a very positive growth. And I think with the release of Svelte 5, whenever that comes, I only expect that to see it to get higher, probably bump up in that kind of, well, definitely north of 1 million range for sure. And kind of just if we look at trajectories, it definitely is going to be potentially within the next 6 months or a year, kind of falling within kind of Angular and Vue territory, which both of those frameworks, I think Angular is around 3.3 million and Vue is something like more like 4 million. So as we kind of inch up, and I could see the Svelte 5 release really helping push those numbers, it will at least kind of be in the same ballpark as those, and those are the number 2 and number 3 frameworks respectively. It'd be awesome to have it kind of be in that mix, and I think that will really help drive adoption where it goes. Seeing, just talking to a lot of like dev managers, kind of seeing it like it's this experimental thing, it's unproven. That's kind of what I hear from people when I talk to them. But if it's like, well, hey, this is, and I'm just totally making this up, but I said, if it's more popular than Angular, I don't think people are going to look at it that way. Then it's like, okay, this is a serious contender. So if we went back a year, it was like half of what the current usage is, and I could understand that. But it's growing, it's growing, it's growing. So who knows what's going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball, but it's certainly trending in the right direction. And comparatively, like if you look at Angular growth, it's kind of stagnated, honestly. Like I think the beginning of in the last year, it's gone from like 3.1 million to 3.3 million. So not that it's 100% stagnated, but it's not rapid growth. It's pretty much tapered off. So we'll see what happens. I'm really hopeful with Svelte 5, and if a lot of good hype comes out of that and people use it and love it, that's I would assume that's only going to help drive things further. We're going to talk about mobile development, but I wanted to talk about the state rune. And I saw something, and I just thought it was too good not to share it with everyone. And I saw a really cool kind of real world, and this is not my example. I got this from another website. I think it was called, I should have cited them. I don't remember now. But they allow you to compare like React to Svelte and Svelte 4 to Svelte 5 and all the different frameworks. Something components, I want to say party components or something like that.
Yeah, I use them all the time.
Okay. Yeah. So apologies to them because I don't have it. I should have actually sourced them. I didn't. But I looked at a more complex, is it party components?
It's component party.
Component party. Okay, great.
Dash party.
Dash party. So go check them out. they had a more advanced state example that used state. And so I think, like myself, as most people, when you learn about runes, usually you see this very simple example of like, yeah, I declare a count of 0 with state and I increment the count. And that's not very interesting. So let's take a look. This is, I guess, what I'd consider a little more interesting real world, I guess, example of how to use state. And by the way, like, Svelte 4 is not bad at all. Svelte 4 is actually pretty good. So I'm not saying like, hey, Svelte 4 is really bad and they totally fixed something that was bad. It's like Svelte 4 is already pretty good. They made something a little bit better, and you'll see why in a second. So just to kind of quickly go recap, Svelte 4, I guess and I'm oversimplifying, but more or less there's 2 ways to kind of handle state in Svelte 4. If you're inside a component, you use the let keyword to define a variable at the top level of your component, and then it automatically is reactive. So as you update it, your template will reflect that. But if you're trying to do something a little more global, so outside of your component, well, then you have to use this concept known as stores. And stores it's not that like stores are particularly hard to use, but it's almost like there's 2 different ways of using state. And I think the team came and said, well, why do we have 2 different ways? There should just be one way to handle it. Who cares if you're in the component or if you're in some generic JavaScript file? Let's make it consistent across the board. So with that, let me show a couple of code examples. First, Svelte 4. And again, I actually think this is kind of cool how they do it. And this is literally a copy paste. Like there's probably some refactoring that can be done here. But they're basically importing a writable store, and then, or this tool to create a writable store, and then they're creating 3 stores. And you know what? They probably could have created 1 store with different properties, but it doesn't really matter. So there's one's called data, one's called error, one is called is loading, and you can see the default is loading to false. And then there's this fetch data function. So prior to the beginning of the function, they set is loading to true. When it's done, they set to false. And when, there's basically 3 states here. I guess for any fetch request, you could say it's an in progress state, it's a success state, and an error state. So that's really what these 3 data stores represent. So it's either loading, it was success, in which case the data store will have the variable, which is set right here. Or if there's an error, we set the error store value here. And then in the template, we just import the naming, it's called use fetch users. It could be called whatever, it doesn't really matter. But basically we call this function that does the fetch request, and then we import these stores, and then it's just using this $ syntax. And so it's watching essentially for this value to change. So when this value is true, you'll see this fetching user state. If an error has occurred, you'll see, of course, this state. And then finally, success state, you see a list of users. So just to like, I'm going to change this number to 30. Maybe we'll see the loading state. Or here, let me make it bigger. There we go. So you could see, hopefully you could see that for everyone online, there we go. If we get 3,000 users, it takes a little bit longer and it comes back. And just to show the error state, let me just throw in some random character here. And, oh, that's funny. Let me put in something else that way. Okay, so this is like an invalid request. So you can see now the 3 states. Yeah. So that's Svelte 4. So like, I don't think this is bad by any stretch of imagination. I think it's kind of cool that I could create these stores and watch it. And this is very clean. Now let's just compare that again, not bad. But just to kind of make another point, if I want to now create a count variable, I'd say let count equal 0. It's like, okay, well now I'm using stores and I'm using count, and these are different things. Going to Svelte 5, and I actually took the same example. I did a tiny bit of refactoring, but basically it's the same idea. I use this state rune, and instead of having 3 separate states. Essentially, I just have one object that has properties is loading data in error, and it's a state object. The same general concept is loading true is loading false. If there's error, I'm sorry, if there's data, I set it there. If there's an error, I set it there. And then I did a little bit of refactoring, but essentially, if the page state is loading, you notice I don't need to use that $sign. And it's the same general concept, but what's nice is now if I'm using state, I just say let count equals state. Oops, if I could type state 0. It's the same exact, and I typoed count, but you get the idea. It's the same exact syntax. You can use it interchangeably. So I think, I don't know, to me, when I saw that, I felt like that helped really illustrate not only just kind of the cool idea of like how you can set the state very clearly here inside this function. I kind of refactored it a little bit to be like this generic get fetch state function. So you pass it an actual callback, or you can pass it a function that will get your data. Yeah.
I noticed you're also in the Svelte 40, you were doing .set, like you're actually calling a function to set it, whereas this one you simply assign.
Assigning,
feels more natural.
Good point. Good point. Yep, a very good point. Where was I doing that? Yes, right. So do I have the Svelte 4? So did I close it? This is Svelte 4. So you're right. You're right. I didn't even notice that the .set versus just straight up assignment. So way cleaner. Way cleaner. So I don't know. To me, I saw that I was like, hey, I can kind of get it a little bit better. Hopefully, you guys find that helpful as well. But with that, and yeah, I can close these tabs. I'm going to go on to kind of the main topic for today. I was also supposed to have someone that wanted to convert a React project to Svelte. Someone kind of new, just learning. He just texted me like a few minutes ago. They can't make it, so maybe next time. But yeah, let's go over how we're gonna our options for making mobile apps in Svelte, and then I'm gonna actually go ahead and create a real simple example for you guys. Okay, so.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh yeah, go for
the
it.
Previous app, the link that you said, did you deploy that app yourself, or are they providing that app?
So there's for Svelte 4, there's a website, just sveltedev.com, and then there's a REPL tag, and you can go and write as much code as you want, and they just provide that to you. Svelte 5, which is, I forget the exact URL, svelte-preview something. They have a similar feature, although it's not quite as it's not as easy like to save your REPLs. So, but yeah, you can use both of them and play around with them. So yeah, I wrote the code, but didn't like create the site for that.
So REPL-like.
Yeah. And there's other like you can actually create, I forget the name. There's other tools out there where you can actually create like servers and play around with the server side functionality. I
just noticed it was deployed with Vercel, and I was wondering what your experience was with Vercel.
I have used Vercel. I guess I do have a slide where I touched on it briefly, but I guess the short answer is extremely simple to use, seamless. It's as simple as, I guess, merging into your main branch, and you have control over it, but you can make it so I merge into main or I check into main. Boom, it deploys it into production. Or if you prefer, deploys into this unique staging URL that you can share with someone, and then they can click a button and approve it. So kind of giving you a chance to preview it first. So super slick, super nice. The downside is it's maybe a little more expensive than if you build out all your own infrastructure, but of course, building on all your infrastructure, whether you use AWS or something else, has its own costs. And I mean, I work companies that have these huge DevOps teams. I'm sure they don't, they're not free either. So I'd be curious to see a cost analysis. But yeah, Vercel, my experience has been great. Okay, so mobile development with Svelte. So that's one thing I hear when I go, and I love talking to other technical people about Svelte. a lot of people eventually ask, oh, what about mobile, right? Because the reality is React is probably the biggest, but React is the biggest framework. That's what a lot of people are using. And people are like, no, hey, if I use React for web, I can use React Native. And what about Svelte? So the truth is there's multiple options available. There's no like official way to do it. I happen to capture three of the most common ways, and I will recommend one of them in a second, based upon what the community feedback is on that. But just to be clear, there's no, like, you go to the Svelte docs, they don't say, hey, here's how you make a mobile app, and this is the steps we recommend you take. So you have several options. The first one being Svelte native. And I think a lot of people, this is kind of what they stumble upon when they search for Svelte and mobile development. Now, I just want to be clear, I've never done React Native. I've never done Svelte Native. What I can say is, as far as I know, React Native is like officially supported. I believe it's officially supported by Facebook, and I could be totally wrong on that. I'm making a big assumption, but that was at least my understanding. Svelte Native is not, just to be clear, not supported by the Svelte team. It was an independent project, or it is an independent project. So someone basically thought they could make something similar to React Native. I think I've heard both mixed experiences with it. I think the biggest thing is because it's an independent project, it doesn't have millions of dollars behind it and countless dev hours. So by all means, you can make mobile apps using Svelte Native. And a little bit about how it works. It's built on top of another open source project called NativeScript. NativeScript is a way to make mobile apps using vanilla JavaScript, or any JavaScript for that matter. So several years ago, I heard of people trying to make an Angular mobile app using NativeScript. What I know for sure, NativeScript did not take off like, say, React Native did. I don't know if that's because it's not as good or it just wasn't as popular, but it never really released kind of had that mainstream kind of adoption. Just to clarify, it is not HTML based, so similar to React Native, it is its own custom XML. So the JavaScript, you still program with JavaScript, but instead of using HTML, you use XML, its own custom XML. And some people vouch for it, so I don't mean to like downplay it, but some people vouch for it. I guess I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit. And I'm going to talk about PWAs. And I feel like a lot of people probably heard about PWAs, but maybe don't know exactly what they are. Some people might not even consider them mobile apps, depending upon how you look at it. Basically, a PWA is an alternative way to make an app. The biggest difference is you don't actually use an app. A PWA is not distributed via an app store. So most people, I think, are trained, hey, I want to, download Facebook. They're going to go to the app store and find Facebook or whatever, TikTok, whatever sort of stuff people like to download. A PWA, and actually had some experience with this, so it's a little bit dated now. Basically, you go on your phone, you go to a website, and they provide a link for you, and you essentially download a app, if you want to call it an app, and it has a little icon, it has a name, and you run it, and it looks like an app. It performs like an app. There's a couple caveats to that, and it's 100% web-based technology. It's HTML, JavaScript, CSS. And there's some rules in making PWAs. I can't remember, but you need to have I think a manifest file, and there's certain files you need to have to go with it. Now, it's a little bit limited to whatever APIs are available through, through web engines, right? So if you're building a native app, there's all this functionality you have, whether it's geolocation or file access or cameras or gyroscopes. Who knows? There's lots of native functionality now.
Magnetic compass direction is the key one that's just doesn't happen.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the web does have, you can have like geolocation via web browser. I'm sure a lot of us experience that. You can access your camera or microphone or certain things, but it's a little bit limiting. And I think really, not to get like too much on kind of a soapbox a little bit, but my experience, and I worked for a company that built, it was a platform for making mobile apps and PWAs, a no-code platform. So we had thousands of apps that people would make using our tools. I guess just to put it frankly, like the Android experience was pretty good. They made it easy for you to get a PWA on your device. It worked well on iOS devices. They made you jump through like hoops, essentially. You had to press more buttons. You really had to kind of know what you were doing. And I'm not even up to date with the latest with the EU, but they kind of messed around. There's this whole thing about allowing different browsers on iOS devices. And when I understand, they kind of disabled PWAs in Europe. And so I think PWAs like are a great idea for iOS. I would kind of say be careful, know what you're getting yourself into. And I kind of feel like maybe Apple wants people to use the App Store, not to download PWAs, and they want to get their cut of revenue. And so it's probably not a mistake that it's not a first-rate experience, where Google probably doesn't care as much about getting App Store money. They want to promote the web a lot. So PWAs are cool and great, but I can't fully recommend it because of the caveats I just listed. Again, there's other ways other than these three ways, but the last one I'm going to talk about is capacitor, which I got to unfortunately tell like a little bit of a long story, but back in the day we had something known as PhoneGap, or kind of similar to PhoneGap. Cordova was the open source version, and PhoneGap I think was kind of a layer on top of that wasn't open source. And I remember Facebook back in the day, they made a lot of headlines because they built one version of the Facebook app using basically PhoneGap, and it's basically what they used to refer to as hybrid apps. And so you're building using web technologies, building in a web view, so essentially in a web browser, and I guess I'm not going to get into a ton of details, but you could also access native functionality. And without going in the whole history of PhoneGap and Cordova, the apps weren't bad. And I saw a lot of apps because I worked for a company. That's what we did. The apps, I wouldn't look at the app and be like, oh, this is not a native app. Like maybe some people could do that, or maybe you're making some fancy game or something. Like, yeah, you probably not like optimal performance, but for 90% of the stuff out there, I don't think you'd really tell a difference. That's my impression. But the developer experience was awful. My developer experience was awful, and people dropped it. Now there is a company, Ionic. Some of you might be familiar with it. And way back when, they created their whole platform as, hey, we're going to make it really easy for people to build mobile apps using web technologies. And they were 100% reliant on PhoneGap, essentially. And I think and they were also tied directly to the initial versions, tied directly to Angular 1. And I think at some point they figured out, number one, hey, Angular might not be number one forever. We better make our system work with any front end framework. So they made those changes. But then they also said, hey, this Cordova PhoneGap stuff is pretty awful. We gotta come up with our own solution to that. So they made Capacitor, and Capacitor is free. It's open source. To oversimplify, it's basically it's in some ways similar to PhoneGap, but they made a modern version that doesn't suck, I guess, to put it one way. And yes, you can just similar to PhoneGap, you can use native functionality, but it is free. You don't have to sign up for anything. Actually, when I first heard about it, because I saw that like, oh, it's by this Ionic team, I assumed there was a cost associated with it. No cost whatsoever. It's just something they support, and there's like, they're actively supporting it, so they're keeping it up to date.
Does it deploy through the App Store?
It is. It's 100% using the App Store, so you don't have that issue where you do with PWAs. So drum roll. I think we all know where this is headed, but really, just based upon you go on like the Svelte subreddit every few weeks, someone asks this question: hey, I want to make a mobile app with Svelte, how do I do this? And 9 times out of 10, people are like, use Capacitor. And occasionally someone will say, oh yes, I used Svelte native and it was great, but that's kind of the minority of what people recommend. And as you just asked, but yeah, you can use the official. Oh, hey. Can you just go through there?
Quick question for you. If I park over there at plastic surgery parking, are they going to tow me or not? I don't know.
I don't know.
I parked here.
Yeah,
I parked right
This
here.
side.
I've never had a problem. I can't vouch for it, but you might be safe. Hey, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So just we're streaming live and also kind of in person, but feel free to speak up if you have any questions or anything. So yeah, I guess you just kind of jumped the gun, I guess. But yes, you can use, or you thought ahead, I guess. You can use the official app stores. You have access to all the native APIs, and it is by far the most popular amongst the Svelte community. So, and let's go ahead and demonstrate how this works. Actually, but before that, a quick note about SvelteKit. So there's a lot in this slide. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all this detail because I can spend 10, 15 minutes talking about it. All I want to say is when you build, a couple points. When you're going to build something with Svelte, I don't care if it's 100% going to be client side, use SvelteKit. Why? And I know when I first was learning Svelte, I was like, oh, I don't want to do server side stuff. I don't care about server side rendering. Really, SvelteKit is kind of a lot of things put together, but think of it more as like a CLI. This CLI will allow you to create traditional single page apps. It allows you to create server side rendering based apps. There's also a lot of great features that SvelteKit offers. If you want to do backends, actually our last meetup, that's what we talked about. Go look at last month's video if you want to get up to speed on SvelteKit. A lot of cool stuff in SvelteKit. The reason why I mention it here is number one, please use SvelteKit. Don't get scared away about all these options and stuff. You don't have to do it. But the other thing I want to call out, not only does it allow you to kind of create different types of sites, really all the major types you'd want, SSR, SPA, or static site generation. It also allows you to target certain both hosting providers, and we talked about this earlier a little bit. So yeah, what they call zero config hosting provider. So you can say, oh, I'm going to use Netlify, so I'm going to use this adapter. And it's really just this plugin, so it's not like you're locked in. And I guess we're not going to go in detail, but it's pretty easy. You just install a NPM package, you update a single file, and then when you target, say, Netlify, Cloudflare, Vercel, Azure, SWA, which I actually don't know exactly what that is. I'm not an Azure guy. Azure. What's that?
It's so great.
Yeah. But yeah, so you can basically target any environment or provider, including AWS via SST, or you can just target a generic node adapter. It's all up to you. But one of the things you can, I guess the whole reason why I bring this up is you can do static site adapters. And what does that mean? Well, the main thing here is you're not going to write server-side code on your mobile app. Your mobile app, you can have servers, they can be running somewhere in the cloud, but they're not going to be running servers on your mobile phone. That doesn't make any sense. So hopefully that makes sense. So when it comes, I'm going to show the steps. I did this myself the other day. Let's do a live demo and see how smooth or how bad it goes. But really, it's not hard. And even if
a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you have experience with Next.js as well?
With what?
Next.js?
I don't.
Okay.
But it's the React equivalent to SvelteKit.
So I was just wondering kind of what your thoughts were comparison wise.
I haven't used it and there's also Remix on the React side. I have tiny bit of exposure to that. And when I looked at SvelteKit initially, I was like, oh, there's a lot of overlap here. So I think there's probably a lot of similarities, but I'm not like an expert to say, hey, this is better or worse. Although I do know just working with Svelte, I like that way better than working with React. For me, that's definitely the case. Okay, so I'll just gonna walk over these high level and then let's go ahead and do it. So literally you just create a SvelteKit project, just like you would anywhere. Anytime you create a SvelteKit project, you, as I mentioned, use a static adapter. Once we do that, then we add capacitor as a dependency, and then you basically say, hey, I want to add iOS support, and you can also do Android support, and then you just say, hey, open it on iOS or Android. And
question is,
Yeah.
The static adapter, the reason you're choosing that is because it's going on a phone, so there is no server backend.
There's no server anywhere. Yeah.
So that's a requirement for any of this to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there's another way to make it work, I'm not aware of it. Yeah.
Right. But from the static adapter, you can still make REST API calls out to whatever you feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're not limited.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not getting
Think of it as like a website, it's the client side portion of your website, not the server side portion. So yeah, you can call Firebase, Supabase, your own RESTful APIs, GQL, whatever, but it's not going to run on your phone. You're not going to run a RESTful service on your phone because that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's the steps. So I'm just going to do this on the fly. And let's see what happens. And if it blows up, it blows up. But I did this once and it seemed to work okay for me. So I'm just going to go here and open a terminal. And let's see, go CD play. And I'm going to copy and paste this command. And let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for everyone. Okay. Now I'll do full screen on both of these and just hopefully makes it easier. Okay, so this is regardless if you were creating a mobile app, a client side only app, a server side, whatever. This is how you create apps via SvelteKit. Do we have any requests for names? I was going to go with my app, but does that work? Anyone got a funny name? All right, let's just go with my app.
Let's go La Jolla. We're here
La Jolla? Okay. La Jolla. Should I dash it? It's 2 words. Okay, La Jolla. Okay, so this is just standard SvelteKit. It's going to say, hey, what do you want to use? You want basically a demo app where I forget, I think they just have some basic stuff wired up for you. No, we don't want that. I'm going to just do a skeleton project, which is bare bones. If we were creating a library, we'd select that option, but we're not creating a library. Do I want to use JavaScript or TypeScript right now? I'm just going to go with JavaScript. None of these, oops. Oh, I was going to select certain options and I didn't by accident. It would, here, I'm going to go over it quickly. I could have selected like prettier, ESLint, all that. the last time I did this, it actually asked me if I wanted to use Svelte 5 or not. Svelte 5 is not production ready. It's kind of alpha. I don't know why it didn't give me that option, but okay. So I'm going to do CD La Jolla. Okay, wrong button. Oh, yeah. There we go. I'm going to do npm install. Shouldn't take long, assuming our internet is good here.
Do you use PNPM?
That's certainly a favorite. A lot of people are using that. I wouldn't use yarn. I guess that's all I would say.
I would use yarn.
Yeah, I would use PNPM or I don't know. You know, the one reason I would use npm is just that's kind of the standard thing. PNPM seems to be pretty popular, so I don't know. It's not bad.
What do you like PNPM?
Because I don't want to take over here, but because it's exactly syntax matching with npm, but it's much faster and uses way less disk space.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of caching, I guess, right? It does.
Well, it uses hard links on your OS. So
Okay.
it looks around and says, oh, you've already got 7 other projects that use these 40,000 files. So I'll just hard link to them instead of actually re-downloading them.
Right.
So, I mean, every time I make a project, there's 40,000 new files in there. It drives me insane that are using up disk space. So PNPM is just super fast.
Yeah. And I don't want to get too side railed. There is one reason, which maybe isn't the best reason, but there's one reason why. There's a tool I use that's not compatible with it, and that tool is awesome. So
Yeah, makes sense. Of course.
Will that tool, and I'm not going to mention by name, will they get their act together or what? We'll figure that out. Okay, so this has created an empty shell. I'll just run this, and nothing particularly interesting here. And sorry, I have a multi-monitor set up, so let me make sure I bring this over to the right. Okay, so this is the bare bones things it creates. So let's go on to the next step, and that was covered here. Actually, you know what? Give me just 1 minute. I'm going to step out. I'll be right back.
Hey, do you work with Svelte?
No, not yet.
That's why you're here to learn about it.
Yeah,
Nice.
but I think I might like it more than like React and all that. So
I do. I've been using it for about 18 months now, and it's just a joy. And React was incredibly confusing and heavyweight and overly chatty to me. I like to pick the new thing that's up and coming that's not here yet.
I just want my stuff to work.
Yeah.
You know, by the way, we have a live stream. Usually there's an audience that posts something, and I'm not seeing it. I'm wondering.
Is there anybody on the live stream?
I can't tell right now. So,
Oh, I see.
actually, yes, there are 13 people. Okay, cool. So everyone's just watching quietly. So that's great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. This is not interesting, a bare bones site, but we can do some cool stuff. I'm going to kill this for, I'll open another tab. So CD play, what was it called? La Jolla. That's an awful name for
La Jolla Playhouse.
There you go. Okay, and I'm just going to open it up in Visual Studio Code. And yeah, it's much easier to manage the live stream having multiple windows, but if for some reason wants to open everything up there as well. So give me 1 second while I drag this across. Okay, here we go. Here's our La Jolla app. Nothing super interesting here. It's just a bare bones SvelteKit app. And this is literally what we saw. No survey, please. So we could obviously customize this if we want. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. I'm going to go back to the directions. And where did I get that? Use a SvelteKit static adapter. So I'm going to go, I got the link handy here. This actually kind of walks you through it. I'm just going to copy and paste it. And let's do that. And where was that? That was this. So it does this kind of generic one by default, but you can say, oh God, why is it copy and paste not? I had this problem the other day. I'm just going to manually copy and paste. Okay, now I have to make a couple. Now by default, it's going to output to this build directory. I already know that capacitor is going to look for it in a dist directory. So I'm going to change these two settings. I could also change it on the capacitor side. There's also a setting config file, but I'm just going to do it this way. Okay, so I did that. I need to update. Yes, I need to do that. I did that. There's one more thing. I need to set pre-render to true. I'm trying to remember why I need to do that, but it is a step I need to do. Feel free to ponder that while I do this and maybe.
I mean, it forces the static generation of all the assets, I think. But you would think
right.
An adapter static would be smart enough to know that, but.
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't get. Like, why doesn't the adapter handle it? But we have to add this file and set the setting. And that is going to be broken in the meantime. Okay. And then we have to add capacitor. So let's open up the link here. Install capacitor. I've already actually, I don't need to do this because I already have a capacitor. I will run a build of my app now that I've changed the setting. Here, let me just do it from this terminal. I don't need another terminal window. And it's npm run build, I believe. Oh, you know what? I missed something. I need to install the static adapter npm package, and I think that was called out here, and I kind of jumped over it. Here we go. Yeah, I skipped over that. Let's install that.
That's
the tow truck.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I installed that. Now it should work. Okay, let's see. Val's prefix with plus. Let me just make sure I put this layouts.js. Is it layout? Layout. You're right. Okay, and I made that same mistake. I did this. Okay. Okay, so that seemed to do it. And I think the website now should be happy again. Okay, now, I'm going to change this. I don't need this guy anymore. Okay, so back to the instructions. Capacitor. So I'm going to add the dependencies for, I guess, for iOS and Android. I could just do one or both, but let me do that. Good. Now cap is basically capacitor. I'm just going to do iOS for now. Oh God, what did it not like? Cannot determine executable to run. That's interesting. Did not run into that before. Let me make sure I didn't miss something.
I mean, you are in your VS Code terminal. Is it possible your other terminal has got better paths?
There's something where you have to open a new terminal window now that I think about it. So let me try try that again. Cannot determine executable to run. Let me.
Is it upset about NPX or upset about CAP?
Here, let me just try play La Jolla. Here, try that one more time. Can I have a turn? Let's just do NPX cap, see what happens. Oh, today, and I thought I installed cap. Let me just confirm.
That's possible.
Oh, I did not. Yes, I did not install capacitor specifically for this app. Okay. And I'm not following. Yes. Okay. Yes, I needed to do that. Okay. I needed to install capacitor. I kind of skipped around a little bit.
Yeah, you need it for this directory for this app.
Yeah, for this app specifically. It's not a global install. Okay, so I think that should do it. App ID for no, please add it to capacitor. Okay.
That makes sense.
So
Native app.
capacitor.config. Where the heck is this? In capacitor.config or, oh, okay. So let me just run this cap in it. These probably are all in the steps and I just skipped over them without paying attention. Okay, so yes, now I added what it needed. So let's do that again. And believe me, it's always easier when you're not in front of a crowd of people.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that did its thing. And if I remember correctly, there's just, okay, good. I think there's just one more step now. And I'll come back to this later. Oh God, it's NPX cap. I think Open iOS is the one. And do I have it in my slide? I might also have it in my slide here. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Add iOS and Open iOS, and then hopefully this doesn't take too long.
Oh, does that run like an Xcode?
It will fire up Xcode,
iOS.
and I didn't have an Xcode installed on this machine, and that. It wasn't like horrible, but I was like, man, this is not fun.
That's
4 gigabytes.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, what are you downloading?
So, so multiple monitors. Okay, so I'm gonna grab Xcode and bring it over here. And I am not, I also had to, if you never installed Xcode, you have to install Cocoa pods, or I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Cocoa Pods.
Cocoa
Yeah,
pods. Yeah, which wasn't in any directions I followed initially. Okay, let's fire this up. Let's see what happens. In theory, oops, I clicked it twice. Okay. In theory, it's build succeeded, and it should open up I think they call it simulator.
Yeah,
Here we go.
Yeah.
And it's going to be our pathetic little app that we made that doesn't do anything. Just wait for it. Get ready to be amazed.
Well, at least you didn't build it for that.
Oh, what? Oh, yeah.
Okay, I am rich.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you'll notice you probably want to add some styling so your text is not coming up here. Now, there's extra steps here. We could now go ahead and add all sorts of stuff here. I'm going to just briefly discuss something we could have done.
So quick
Yeah.
clarification. So given the weird styling, capacitor is really just getting you into a native environment. It's up to you now to make sure that you're using the screen size properly, and so you've got access to native APIs, but we're at like a skeleton of just nothingness for the app so far.
Right.
So
Now,
something like
Ionic, the product, they provide all that stuff. So if you wanted to, what the hell does it mean? Sorry, I'm going to curse. Okay, whatever. You don't need that. Okay, a bunch of people chimed in saying they're here. Awesome, cool. Oh, James is here. Welcome, James. He was supposed to come in person, and welcome everyone else. Okay, sweet. So they have an example, and they have plugins. If you want to add a geolocation, you npm install this thing, and then you can add it. And we could go through all those steps, but one thing you have to do is actually add permissions, and it's a little bit tedious. So I went through this exercise myself, and I did a couple more steps. So I'm going to skip ahead, and here I'm going to kill this for now, and I am going to back out of this, and I put under work, and then where is it under mobile app? It's my fancy name. And then what was that command I ran? Run iOS, I think.
Yeah.
And let's see, this was basically showing some native functionality. And no, this didn't ask me to do this last time. iPad.
Your emulators to run?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, I added options. I'll add iPhone 15. Why not? Pro Max. That's cool. Let's do that one. Okay.
Although that's downloading an entire emulator for that.
Oh, is it?
For that phone.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be faster if you open up the one that
the same
phone
one
that was just there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's give it a second, and if it's still going, maybe I'll try that.
Yeah, it's a pain because it basically pulls down the entire iOS, an entire operating system for every single emulator, for every single phone you pick.
All right, so you're telling me I made a bad decision.
You should find the one that you were
What was the one I had?
I don't remember.
I think it was a 15.
I don't remember.
Okay, let's just try that. And of course I killed it. So we'll give it some time, but basically here, let me show the code base while that's doing that, because I did a few things. Oh, it's working. I'll show you the code for this. Here, let's chew gum and walk at the same time. So that's not what I wanted. Oh God. Where was I? CD work, mobile app. Yes, this is what I wanted. And okay, so I requested geolocation services. This is what Apple does. It says, do you want to allow? I'm going to say allow while using the app. Yes. Hey, look at that. It knows we're in San Diego. Isn't that cool? Like, so this is, I hooked it up to a real Google Maps API. I did a little bit of cleanup so this stuff isn't like up here. So there is kind of, it's actually, they call this out in the capacitor docs here. Did I open code? Yeah, I don't think I did.
And if I can put a positive spin on it, it's really cool that you have access to every pixel on the phone. So I know it looks bad,
yeah,
but if you wanted to make a game that extended past there, that's just so much nicer.
So
you can't get at that.
As someone who worked on a platform that worked, that targeted multiple devices, including the Apple devices, that's something everyone has to deal with. Like, it's like, hey, there's this cool space here, but don't put anything important here. And depending upon the device, it's going to be a little bit different. So, but yeah, I basically more or less copied their example and modified it, and I used Google Maps, which it didn't. And this is not, honestly, I kind of just threw this together. So this is not like pristine, I guess, Svelte code, like doing something I should not be doing, document.get element by D. You don't want to do that in Svelte. But it was late at night and I was hacking away and just was like, whatever, I just want to get this to work. But I added some, and you get this from the capacitor site, I believe, just kind of standard styling so that certain things, like if by default, if you click in here, it will automatically zoom in. You kind of want to disable that. You want to make sure there's some padding. So yeah, you would add a couple. Oh, and another thing in here, you put this viewport option. Yeah. So there's a couple things that you do to kind of make it a little bit nice. But now that we're here, you can, again, don't use server side logic, but you can do anything you can do in Svelte here. And it works just like Svelte does. And you have access to these native functionality. So
Do you have a favorite library, CSS library that makes it render and look like iOS or look like Android? You know, I've heard of like Flowbyte and things like that.
yeah, so I mean, I can't say specifically to iOS or mobile, but I do know I've used Flowbyte for just like a web-based app, and now I was pretty happy with that. There's also something called Skeleton UI, which is Svelte specific. That is very nice. I don't know
For mobile though?
I don't know if that's mobile specific. But yeah, certainly you can use Tailwind, and I don't really know specific to mobile what's the best options there. I don't know.
Consta, I think it is. Yeah, anyway, there's a couple of libraries out there that specialize in faking the CSS to look like native
Okay.
iOS
okay.
and native Android.
So yeah.
I think Consta is one of them.
Okay. Yeah, offhand, I'm not aware, but also that's kind of what Ionic is trying to be. Like, well, there's several things, but part of it's like, hey, we have these native components that are going to look like mobile and you don't have to make it. And they're more than just that, to be clear. They help you with deployment and other things like that. But anyways, that's kind of the whole thing. So hopefully it demonstrated it was relatively straightforward. I mean, I just did this on the fly. I didn't even follow the directions properly, and we got it up and running pretty quickly. So yeah, that's kind of it. So I'm gonna leave the floor. That's the last slide. Yeah. Any questions, comments, things we want to talk about? What's that?
I want to give people online a chance.
Yeah, online. Anyone? I got a bunch of people saying they're here, but yeah, I'll just kind of give everyone a minute if you want to post a question or just comment, really anything. If not, we'll kind of wrap things up here. Yeah, and oh, sorry, was there a comment? Yeah, I was going to say, I know James in particular wanted to do. He was working on a React project, was interested in converting to Svelte. I was thinking that might be a nice kind of project for next time, if you guys think would be interested. I'm open to requests as well. And if Svelte 5 is coming out next month, definitely going to be talking about that. But otherwise, yeah, share feedback if you have any thoughts or anything particular you want to hear about. Someone said thanks. So yeah, you're welcome anytime. And yeah, anything else?
I came tonight with a thought, but I want to be respectful of all the people online as well.
Okay, so you want to hold it after?
Well, it's an idea. So I'll just throw it out to the room. We don't have to talk about it now, but I sometimes struggle with pulling in vanilla JS libraries. So say, for instance, the Acrobat, the Adobe DC Acrobat PDF viewer. I've got it working, but I'm sure it's just poorly done.
We covered like binding and some of that stuff and using third-party libraries in a prior meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know if there was something specific about this library that was troublesome, but we can potentially go over a similar topic. Or
it's just the general strategy of like I made this little component that has an Adobe DC viewer in it that I've got sprinkled all over my pages, but I have a feeling that component is now pulling in the same library over and over and over again because it's using Svelte head. And I'm trying to think of a strategy where can I just make one single globally available Adobe Acrobat viewer across my entire giant app that I can then call on from a child component. And I'm just struggling with some like really basic Svelte stuff of like, is that a store? Is that a global? And how do I make sure that it's in the right place?
Yeah. So off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that. James said that's super impressive. So there's a Svelte Discord channel. If you're not active on there, I occasionally go and post like a question, and sometimes you have to be a little patient, but usually there's some pretty good, I mean, there's members of the Svelte team on that channel, so you're going to get good responses if they choose to respond to it. So I would highly recommend checking that out, I guess, for everyone. Because yeah, there's very knowledgeable people in there. And I'm certainly happy like to dive into that deeper next time if we have that as an subject that people are interested in too. Just like as a follow up. So.
And I have another one. Other people asking questions.
Someone said, "Will this guy stay quiet? He's really bothering me." No, no question. Just I guess some support, which I appreciate. So
the other sort of big strategic question.
Yeah.
So I would love to. So SvelteKit's a compiler. Beautiful developer experience. I would love to build like a no-code website where I can let just regular people come and drag things on and create their own components. But I have a feeling once I'm there, I've lost a compiler. I don't, these are not developers. I'm not using a compiler at that point. So now I'm just dynamically using Svelte's dynamic ability to create components. And it feels like kind of a step backwards. It's like, but if you were making a no-code environment where you could drag out and build your own components and reuse them without.
Well, when you're actively developing Svelte, I mean, you don't have to run a build process every time you make changes. So I don't actually know, is it secretly running that compiler behind the scenes? Is it just doing it super efficiently so you don't even notice
Yes,
a latency?
there is an enormous amount of JavaScript being written for you, hidden in the background. I mean, that think of like an each loop.
So could you have that running on a server possibly? A container?
I kind of fantasize about that as like, wow, I could expose the SvelteKit server compiler on my server. So when people are building their components, it'd be like
it's the REPL.
It's the REPL concept.
Like they I don't know exactly how they did it, but they did it, right?
So yeah, it'd be cool if people could just no code drag stuff out, and I've got you're right, the REPL style compiler there that's actually doing all the magic that SvelteKit does. And
I actually don't want to misspeak, but it's loading stuff in the background when you first fire it up. So
it is.
I don't know if it's web worker or servers or what, but maybe it's a web worker, which you might be able to do. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I mean, nowadays there's so much stuff running in the client. I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm just gonna do a hard refresh and see. Oh, yes, reload. I know see loading. Well, it went very fast, but it was loading the compiler. That's a great question. It's probably something to look into, and they're doing it here, so it is possible. How difficult or hard, I don't know.
It's a good question. Is that thing doing server-side magic or client-side magic?
Well, yeah, actually, the previous URL you had there with a Svelte 5 preview that was I wonder if it's open source. And if it's open source, you can see how it is.
I know this is open source.
REPL?
Svelte.dev, because actually the preview site is open source. Yes, I've gone because I saw when they made changes to the frequently asked questions about when Svelte 5 was coming out. There's a pull request. I was able to take a look at it. Which, if we're super curious.
Yeah. And then there's a packaging question.
I mean, the short answer is yes, it's there.
REPL's probably open source too, right?
So if you can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. So Svelte is a compiler, so this is not easy, but like sites preview, right? It's all in here. Where is it? I don't know, but you
should figure it out.
You can poke around and find it. I'm
so good at volunteering people.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see, sandbox. Nope.
Okay.
I did have a question if you guys
go for it.
Like, I'm not in that space, so I don't really know essentially, but like the mobile apps, people kind of still use this sort of, the approach is native, because it seems like you were mentioning with Facebook, right? I remember vividly that whole situation. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg went on the record saying HTML5 messed them up, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like roughly 10 years ago. That was also, I mean, there's a reason why Ionic, the company, said we're not using this PhoneGap stuff anymore. We're building our own tool. If you're a $1 billion company, you probably can afford to have native developers doing both, right? If you're, I don't know, something smaller than that, then it's kind of a trade-off, right? It's all, what's more important, saving money or having the most native experience possible, and yeah, just decisions to be made. So
yes, but I guess you gotta actually see those things in the real world. People use, let's say, web technologies to build mobile apps.
yeah, I mean,
I see that. That seems like the majority of them. That's why there's 1 million apps in the store because they're going cheap with
well,
web technology.
the company I work for, they're still around, and they had many competitors. It was basically no-code / low-code solutions for making mobile apps, and those solutions actually built on PhoneGap, and they had over 10,000 apps built on the platform. This was several years ago, so they're out there. Yeah,
I swear, every restaurant I go to that makes me download a loyalty program app is the shittiest version. You can tell it's just HTML squished into a native app.
Right.
They did no effort whatsoever to make it actually.
Let's say at that point, I guess I'm wondering, how is that better than a website, like a mobile website?
Thank you. It's not.
It's not.
But I have to say, and like, I'm not trying to like plug my former company, and I won't mention them by name. They actually had some pretty good apps, and they had some of their apps had millions of users, and like, I don't know. So yeah, you probably can get a range of garbage to like pretty solid stuff.
I am not denigrating the technology because a person who cares about the end user experience will use your former company's technology to build a beautiful mobile app.
Right.
I'm just saying that these days, the people who are using that ain't putting in the effort.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, because the platform is great.
Okay, sure, yeah, go for it.
So I have personal experience with the mobile. So the geolocation, the lat long coordinates, actually any old HTML browser is allowed to do lat long.
Right.
But it can't do magnetic. It can't. You can't aim it.
Right.
That is forbidden in the browser. I don't know why.
Speaking of which, this might have changed because this was like years ago. Getting geolocation to work in the background.
Oh, sure.
Specifically with PhoneGap was a huge pain in the butt. And there was workarounds, but it was not fun.
Yeah, because nobody. They're trying to prevent that so that people can't be easily tracked.
Right.
That's like you were at ASP.NET developer you mentioned, right? Remember Xamarin?
I do, yeah. So CGen, they were big on, I actually did a contract here a long time ago. They were all in on Xamarin, but I don't think people really use Xamarin anymore.
I tried it. It was painful.
So you tried it?
It hurt.
Well, because you weren't a Microsoft developer. For Microsoft developers, that's supposed to be better. But
good point. I had to learn two things at the same time: Microsoft and Xamarin.
But yeah, it's just a matter of time. It seems like people abandon those approaches. Even like, remember RDIO? I don't know if you guys pre-Spotify days.
The radio? Yeah. RDIO?
RDIO.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kill this stream. Let's continue our discussion, but thanks everyone for joining. Great hearing from everyone. Appreciate the positive feedback, and we'll see you next month.
Oh, he's trying to be back in.